let's try to figure.
Sorry, I started it late.
Nope. Got it. No worries. All right. Let me figure out how to share. Hope everyone's doing great. Thanks for joining on a Thursday evening. I'm sure everyone is already Zoomed and Teamsed and WebExed out this week. So this should be fun though. All right, share screen. There we go. Okay. So Cindy said we're here to talk about some lean stuff. So I asked if we were talking about like leaning towers or when a bank puts a lien on your house when you don't pay your mortgage. She said no. She said nope with this face. No, not really with this face, but I said okay. So like lean beef, closer, because we do want to trim the fat off of all this stuff that we are working on and get to a better process. So hilarity, this is me. This is my professional headshot. I rarely look this good in person. I've been doing UX-y stuff for 21 years. Got my degree is in computer and info sciences from University of Florida. Go Gators. I say I have a minor in psychology. I don't technically on paper, but no one ever asks for your paper. But I did, half of my coursework was in psychology. So that's what I say. And there's my LinkedIn. So Lean UX and Agile. To start, I just kind of want to hear what you guys think of or what you associate when you hear Lean or Agile related to UX or development or really anything in life. So if you want to shout it out, I'll type them in here. If you want to post it in the chat, I'll try to keep up.
I'll watch the chat for you. All right, y'all. What do you think? All right, I'm hearing story points. Flexibility.
Let's see, I don't remember what the thing for the short code for sticky notes is.
I think some of my students might know this. Somebody come off mute. Tell us what the short code is.
What's the keyboard? Yeah,
oh, come on, y'all. I'm looking at you, April.
Oh, and it's just N. Well, that makes sense.
I always just duplicate a bunch of them. Yeah.
Oh man, I typed F. Oh well, I'm falling behind here.
Maybe I'll join you.
Let's see, reducing waste. It makes you pick the color. I don't want to pick the color each time. We got another for you. Whoa, user stories. Iteration. Couple for sprint. I picked the wrong color, I meant to pick yellow. Got another for Scrum. I forget if you can plus these, and we use so many tools at work. I always forget which ones you can plus and which ones you can't. Short timelines, good one.
Cross-functional teams is good.
Ooh, cross-functional teams. I want to just double click. Like I want to double click and just have it be the last thing that I created. Like, why can't I do that?
You should put in a feature request.
I should. I guess if I just hit N and then click, it picks, let's see, faster, backlog. All right, that's pretty good. I think a lot of people have a good sense of what, lean and agile means from a, oh wait, if you click on the sticky note and then the little dot to the side, it'll duplicate it. Well, no, that made an arrow. Oh, well. We'll have a training session on Miro later. So yeah, I mean, I'll go back to me by saying I've done this for a while, but as with, I'm sure everyone else on the call, I consider myself an imposter and I can do this really well, but I also consider myself not an expert at any of this, even though a lot of people seem to, just from the longevity. And I seem to say back in my day a lot lately, and I yell at clouds and tell these kids to get off my lawn a lot, but I really do enjoy coaching and mentoring. But I think it takes the right person to want to listen to me and learn from me. But so if anybody hasn't heard of the Agile Manifesto, hopefully you have. Lean UX stems from that. And these are the things that it values the things on the left, and it values the things on the right a little bit less. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over documentation, customer collaboration. I don't know about contract negotiation, but I wanted to put it verbatim. Responding to change instead of following a plan. I love this one because I hate following plans. Whenever I see a giant Gantt chart or something in a Microsoft project or some other thing, it's like, because none of that's, you're never going to hit any of those dates, and if they make up dates, they ask you to estimate, and they're never right. So, sorry, lots of built up angst from that. So Agile kind of came out of, the developers are like, there's got to be a better way to make software, right? So going back, I forget how many years it was, 20, 25 years, something like that, where, the waterfall process, the business would say, we want to do X, and then they would hand that off to some business analysts, and they would write, hundreds of pages of requirements and hand that off to developers, and they would go build it, and then they would hand that off to QA, and then they would test it, and then they would ship it, and then maybe sometime later, but probably not, they would get feedback from the users. So it took a long time. They had to comb through stuff. It wasn't a great process, and developers, I think, realized that because they would constantly get reports back like, this wasn't used or this was crappy. So they started coming up with this Agile Manifesto, and I like that they call it a manifesto because to me, it's a mindset. It's, trying to just think about how you can make better things more quickly, more nimbly. So a friend of mine who's local, Mike Rapp, I said, what does lean mean to you? And he's like, well, I think of it as the difference between waterfall and agile. And so he kind of threw a bunch of these things at me of how, a waterfall person would think or say, and then how an agile person would think or say. So that's not in the product requirements versus let's explore that and see where it takes us. Or that could be hard to do, which I don't want to harp on developers too much, but I've heard that a lot. It'd be easier if you could say, well, okay, how much time might this take? Or can we do something? We're going to miss our deadline versus the deadline is dependent on the solution we choose. That I know that working for agencies and lots of stuff, they always want to know how long is it going to take. And I feel like you can definitely estimate UX work. There are ways to do it. But I feel like on a lot of the problems that aren't just, we need this web page updated or something, the creative process, they're like, how long is it going to take you to solve this big problem? I'm like, I don't know. How long do I have? I can give you a crappy solution by end of day, a better one in a week, and a great one in a month or two. So the whole deadline-driven software, that's always bugged me. And forgot to say, Cindy may have said this, but definitely want this to be collaborative. I don't mean to like be up here preaching. If anybody has comments, questions, thinks I say something wrong, stupid, or want to add your personal spin or story to it, come off mute and do it. I will definitely not be offended. So a bunch of diagrams, have been out there a while, trying to visually depict kind of what Agile or Lean methodologies are. They kind of say it's supposed to be a small slice of everything every time you work on something versus starting, at the bottom. So you can't just make it functional and then later make it reliable and then later make it usable. You need to kind of take a little bit of each thing every time you build something, which I definitely think is great, right? Because waterfall was kind of this on the left, whereas now you see kind of these little pod or balanced teams, I've heard them called. It has developers and QA and product manager and UX and research, hopefully, and writing, hopefully, and businesses involved across the whole thing. So I definitely think it's a better way to build digital or even physical products and services. And this diagram has been around for quite a while. It's the goal for Agile is to have they say minimum viable product. I think the V should be valuable product, but semantics, maybe arguments. Waterfall, you would kind of start with, okay, let's pick a thing and we'll build that function, and then we'll add some more stuff onto it. So eventually you get to a car, that's what the business may have said we need to build. And then this drawing kind of came along, and each step is meant to be valuable, right? Like you can use a skateboard to travel. So ultimately, if anybody has, learned about the jobs to be done framework, the requester or person's job that they want to do is get from A to B, right? And so, all their friends have cars and they need to drive, 20 miles to work. So they're like, a car is what I want. But ultimately, getting from one point to the next is their job. So a skateboard, technically it's functional and you could skateboard 20 miles. I probably wouldn't want to do it. But yes, it's a mode of transportation. And then at each iteration, you kind of add on to it till eventually you get to the car. One thing about this, it doesn't mean like they show the faces, but just because you build something, you don't necessarily have to release it every time. So if you're working in a 2 or 3 week sprint, in your first sprint, you build a skateboard, that doesn't mean you have to go to production with the skateboard. You may want to user test it, or that that's just, you have to do that, right? Because it's some kind of mode of transportation. And then you add on to it each time. So each level, obviously, there's a usable thing. I saw that. I've always kind of wondered about this though, because going from a skateboard to a bike, I mean, to me, that's a whole different product. Bike to a motorcycle, maybe kind of close, and motorcycle to a car are also very different. So I saw this diagram recently, which I thought was actually really good. It kind of takes that and builds upon it. It says, obviously, if you need to get 20 miles or even 5 miles, you're not going to take a little scooter. And even that's, not necessarily a good agile methodology. So, they start with just kind of a really rough, basically a car. Obviously it has wheels and a frame and an engine and a steering wheel, I assume. And then they kind of add to it over time. It's not polished. It's not amazing to look at, but it's definitely functional. Functional? That's not a good, functional. So I think that's a pretty good metaphor versus this other one, but that one's been around a while and it kind of gets the point across. And I think, as with everything we do, it gets refined over time. So this is just another one I found recently too. I've never seen it in a food metaphor, but if you need a cake or you're trying to cater, a nice event, you're probably not just gonna do the bottom layer and then do the icing. Like you could build the cake that way, right? But you can't really test it along the way and see if it's a good cake, because you don't have a cake till the end. So they're saying start simple with a cupcake. Is the cake good? Is it moist? Did I use the right amount of sugar and flour? Okay, we're gonna add some icing. Does that make it better? Is it worse? Is it the right flavor? Ooh, what about sprinkles? And what about red cake, etc. So I think that's a pretty good metaphor in food also. Scale, diversity, independent units. I didn't even read a lot of these words, but I just look at pictures and I don't read stuff. All right, so the more boring part of Lean UX, so what does the Lean UX process look like? A lot of, when you look around, I had my ideas on it, and I was even debating on whether I should do any kind of slides for this versus just kind of talk about it, but I figured people probably Google it, and I was like, okay, what do you find if you Google it? And so I pulled out a bunch of stuff, and it's kind of more just, here's what I saw and thought was either kind of useful or fairly useful, and they're just kind of talking points, and we can I do have a few examples towards the end of things that I've done in the past that I felt like were in a lean and agile way, and there's tons that I felt like weren't. So we could talk about those at some point too. But to me, no matter how they draw it, there's different words and different ways to draw the process. But this is what I think it distills down to: is learn quickly and cheaply, collaborate with your team often, focus on the product, the users, and the goals more than documentation, iterate. And again, I think it comes back to the mindset. Like, a lot of times I think when enterprises get a hold of whatever it is, sometimes it's just, here's a process, a new better process for manufacturing, right? Like it's just either a faster conveyor belt or a more efficient way to do that. But it really is, unless you have that mindset of trying to be nimble and make things better for the customer, it's very uncomfortable at first, I've seen. When big companies do agile transformations, they kind of take their the existing roles they have and say, okay, now you map them to the new thing, right? So companies in the early, I'm trying to think of the projects, early, what year was it? Early 2000s. I feel like I typically would work with, as a software developer, because we didn't really have UX people or designers back then. So we were just, the developers had to do everything. We would have kind of a business analyst and I guess a business owner, whoever's requesting the thing. And then when companies start doing agile transformations, they say, okay, I'm going to take this business analyst and make them a Scrum master. I'm going to take this project manager, or sorry, the business analyst might turn into a product owner, product manager. The project manager would turn into the Scrum master. And they're trying to just take these processes that they used before and say, okay, now instead of doing that, we're going to do this. And a lot of times it just turned into mini waterfalls instead of actually being lean and agile, because they didn't understand that you can't plan out the whole thing, right? You can plan out a couple sprints ahead. For those who aren't familiar with Agile and Scrum, sprint is just a 2 or 3 week set of work that you plan out. And you plan out a few sprints ahead, but you can't plan out a year or two ahead because stuff changes. Business priorities change, management changes, industry changes, so much changes. And that's why it's like, let's focus on kind of the here and now and make the best thing we can in this smaller time frame, and then iterate and move on. So, that was a lot of words. I found three pretty good sites that really summed up kind of what Lean UX is in kind of an overview. And there was a lot of text, and I tried to just pull out the bullet points, what I thought. I kind of went through basically and I highlighted like I would in a college textbook and said, oh, this. And so I just deleted everything that wasn't highlighted. So these are the kind of things, to me, it's kind of like the words we put in the stickies earlier about what is Lean UX. It's a user-centered design process. It embraces lean and agile methodology, aims to reduce waste and wasted time, wasted money, wasted effort, centered around the users. Collaborative, rapid experimentation, prototyping, get user feedback as early as possible, brainstorming ideas based on customer feedback, research, competitors, observing products in production. I think that's another big one. There's some great products out there that you can do this, Pendo and Full Story, and even bringing people in and just watching them use it. Prototyping, huge in Lean UX, testing your solutions and your hypotheses, and ultimately, whatever you build, if it doesn't work, try again. So that's where the iteration comes in. So this was from a Hotjar blog, and I thought there was just a lot of great points in there. And I think to anyone who's been doing this a while, or even if you kind of just did some learnings in any kind of boot camp or school, a lot of this probably just sounds like UX. I think early on, before there was UX, it was just like good software development practices, and then user-centered design was kind of bandied about, and human-centered design and customer experience design, human factors, human-computer interaction. It's been called a lot of things. I think ultimately you're getting to the same place. They're all kind of based on research and talking to people and collaborating and getting feedback and doing it as often as you can, and not spending a ton of time, money, effort, doing a thing. So not that this is necessarily not new, but this may be, again, me being old and jaded and having a giant soapbox. But I feel like every few years, like UX kind of just gets a new kind of marketing spin on it. But it can, it obviously can be argued that it is iterating and getting better. I just feel like a lot of this, when a lot of this stuff comes out, it feels like it goes back to how, like 20 years ago, like we had to be lean because there wasn't anything, right? We didn't have a research team. We didn't have labs. We didn't have eye tracking. We kind of had to go find our user and sit with them if we were doing enterprise stuff, or just kind of go out into the world and ask people questions. I worked on some doctor's office software as my first job out of college, and I was a little bummed because like while I had to code, I definitely had more questions about the people using it just from my psychology background and curiosity. And I was kind of ask our business people, like, okay, who's going to be doing this patient checkout? And are they at the front desk? And are they standing? Are they on the phone? Like, how are they doing this? So it's kind of starting to ask all these UX-y type questions early on. And they kind of got annoyed, like, oh, we know what we need to build, right? Like, we know our users. Why are you asking these questions? Blah, blah, blah. So a lot of times I would go and try to talk to our people who would do customer service either online or on the phone and say, what are users calling and complaining about, or what do they have questions about? Because that was kind of as close as we could get. But it's really like you just want to learn, and as early as you can, as often as you can. You don't want to build a whole thing and spend a year doing it and then realize that it was terrible and you need to start over, because I've seen that happen too. Projects, taking a year because everyone makes all these assumptions, no one validates it. They're just following their old process, and everyone gets pretty demoralized, and it's not fun. So Hotjar, interaction design, it's a great website. Similar things, a few things said in different ways. Less focused on deliverables, again, greater levels of collaboration, feedback as early as possible, rapid iterative cycles. So it's you kind of just see the same themes coming out from the different sites. Again, they just say them in different ways. A lot of the stuff on Lean UX, and I'll show it at the end, but if anybody's read the book, this is kind of a lot of people. This is kind of what people point to. Like I have this book and I read it and it's great, or I have this book and I haven't read it and it's sitting on my desk and I mean to. So I think a lot of the formal Lean UX, talks a lot about assumptions and questions and hypotheses and testing. So starting with assumptions and questions: who are our users? What's the product used for? When's it used? I feel like these are kind of all things that, typically a UX lead would ask at the beginning of a project. Like you kind of need to know these things before you start solutioning and designing, ideally. And then typically, the things you ideate and prototype on stem from a way to test those assumptions. So who are our users? Your hypothesis might be our users are, moms who had a baby within the last 2 years and are back at work, whatever that is. Could be anything. And then you want to be able to test that, right? So are those actually the people using this product? It's like, just because your business wants to target a segment doesn't mean those are the people that will actually use it. Yeah, we kind of talked about MVP. That's kind of the core concept in Lean and Agile. Going for something that, again, I say valuable because viable doesn't necessarily mean valuable. Just because it's like it works and it achieves the goal, it may not be valuable to people if it's, there's certain features that aren't in there, or it's not, usable in a certain way. Yeah, research, quick and dirty research. I think it's a lot of larger companies and agencies, they do great research. So there's nothing against large research budgets and amazing tools like UserZoom and user testing. Like, they're great tools if you have the time and money for it. Lean kind of says you don't have to do all that stuff. I'm trying to think. So at Regions Bank, we didn't really have a research team. It kind of started, really, what did we have? We had 2 UXers and I think 2 CMS people. And, I think the maturity of UX was, it starts from front-end developers designing everything. And then slowly they realize, oh, like, Apple comes out and says, design is important. Design is important. People kind of buy in and realize it. So the maturity was then, okay, now companies are hiring designers. And some of the more mature companies I saw, they start to hire actual dedicated researchers and writers. But if you don't have all that, a lot of times your UX team is small. I've definitely been a UX team of 1 or 2, and you kind of just have to do what you can. And I think it's just whatever means you have. Sometimes it would be paper prototyping, and I would walk around to a different department that wasn't involved in the thing we were doing, and you just say, if you had to do X, what would you do? and you could, lay down paper screens in front of them, or you could just be observing them use a thing, asking them questions, interviewing, like any of the research methods, unless it's something very specific, like, I don't know, a tax program that accountants use, or, anything in the medical field. There's obviously tons of cases where you can't just use anybody. But for a lot of consumer products, you can, and it doesn't have to be giant, crazy research plans. I do still think you should, write some kind of research plan. Planning research is not super easy, and you get better at it over time, but it doesn't have to be super grandiose and expensive. I've done it sometimes, I'll bug people at Starbucks, and it doesn't work a lot, but I have occasionally I'll be able to get some feedback from people if I'm like, hey, I'll buy you coffee if you look at a thing. I've used, friends and family for ad hoc research. I've posted stuff on Facebook occasionally and said, hey, if I can interview you, or, go try this thing real quick. Because it's easy to send out URLs for prototypes, and you can kind of just hop on a Zoom and watch them do stuff. So there definitely are ways to get feedback. And companies are kind of coming more around to it. They really do want good customer experiences. And so they're usually willing to help you get to the users and customers or prospects. But we don't want these just giant documents, right? Like hundreds of pages of requirements that haven't really been vetted and validated with real people. I saw business analysts create them, and designers didn't want to look at them, and developers didn't want to look at them. And so a lot of times the designers and developers will kind of just get together and work on stuff and say, okay, we think the requirements are basically this. Let's, accomplish them this way. Yeah, I thought this was a good one. Responsibilities for research tend to be spread more widely across the whole team. So instead of just the UX person or the researcher doing it, if everybody kind of takes that mindset that kind of, customer user experience is a little bit of all of our jobs. You don't want UX to be a bottleneck, because if it's only one person, can do research and they're dedicated or not dedicated, they're a bunch of different teams have to use that, obviously, then those teams will just keep moving on. So like, well, we don't have time to do research. So I think the more you can, evangelize and share how to do, quick and good research, the better for your company and products. What does Envision have to say? Not a lot of new stuff, right? Collaboration, streamlining, reduce time to market, user research, removing waste. So we kind of see there's lots of different ways to talk about it and say things about it, but essentially they're all kind of saying the same thing. And, oh, a real example. Let's see. Testing with neighbors. Oh yeah. So when I worked at Nielsen Media Research, I was working on. It was a program I think that Nielsen used to write. What was it? Okay, so Nielsen compensated their families. I don't know if anybody remembers this, the TV ratings before DVRs and all that. So, basically advertisers were trying to figure out, okay, how do we know how much to pay for an ad? And TV networks were like, how much do we charge? That's where the Nielsen TV ratings came in. And we used to compensate all the families that, were a Nielsen family and would push the little box when they're watching TV so that we knew what they were watching. And there was people at Nielsen that would, handle the checks and use the program. And so we were converting it to a web app, and I was, assigned to build it, which meant design and build it. And, no one told me to go sit with the users, but I was just like, well, I need to see what they do now. And so that was kind of a lean UX practice in the kind of early mid 2000s of find out who your users are, go sit with them, watch them. It'll give you great insight into really what they do, what they need to do. And then you can kind of go back, and there was definitely requirements that I was handed that I said, they don't really, this isn't going to help because the way she does this thing, and they're like, oh, well, we didn't even know that. I'm like, well, where'd you get these requirements from? It's just kind of funny. Surveys, I think.
There's actually a question. I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, go for it.
Marcella asked, why are you saying that it strengthens user research when you're doing quick and dirty and letting everyone do it?
You mean, so why are,
Marcel,
not sure I
feel free to
totally
come
understand.
off.
Yeah.
Feel free to come off mute, Marcel, and explain your
Oh,
question.
I think it was on the next slide. There was a bullet point that said strengthens strengthened user research.
Yeah, I think it's just I see that as just a focus on user research, like actually doing it more often, kind of not doing it in these giant, like you don't need to save up 10 or 20 grand and do like one research study for a project. Like if you can do, spend $100 to $200 and do it 10 times, that's what I see it as strengthening, like a focus on it. They're the ones using the product, and yes, you do have obviously business goals to achieve, but I think the more people that are doing it, the more research you can do and the more feedback you get. So that's my interpretation of it. But if anybody else has a different one.
I also think it helps more of the team to adopt the results of the research. Like if you like you were saying, when you were sitting with people, you really connect with them a lot better. And if those people coming up with the requirements had sat with them, they'd have a better idea to build their stuff off of.
But that wasn't originating from Lean, though. I mean, that wasn't one of the original. I mean, that's not something the Lean guy came up with. People were doing that. And just like somebody said, in groups of 5, that's based on Nielsen's, not having to do with Lean. Doing things with 5 to 8 people rather than.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Lean really means like what it says, right? Like try to do things more quickly, cheaper, easier, faster. And it's not to say that, Lean UX is necessarily better than other frameworks or processes. I like the spirit of it. I think agile development is better than waterfall development, but there's probably a whole other set of slides that I could have done about how can you successfully integrate UX into Agile, because I don't feel like the original developers of the Agile Manifesto really, I don't know that they necessarily were UXers. A lot of things they talk about are great, but like as we kind of learn now that they're sprinting along sometimes so fast building stuff, and you're like, wait, we gotta at least pause a little bit to do some design and research. And so there's this kind of weird, like, it's trying to figure out how to integrate them has definitely been an interesting challenge, especially kind of at the enterprise level. I've mostly worked at larger companies, and I found that you kind of have to just, at each company is different, but figure out how to work your way into the process earlier, like where the decisions about kind of direction and what we should be doing are made. I kind of straddled the fence between like UX lead and product management, because I kind of felt like they were sort of the same thing and similar, but again, it just depends on the company. So as a UX lead, if you're involved in those conversations about kind of the roadmap and the strategy of what the company or your department plan to do, you can start thinking about all these things, research and ideation and gathering teams before they get into like backlog grooming. Because I think once you're at that point, they kind of expect to have a solution, and they expect to have designs that they can code off of. Sometimes if you have a really great product manager, they realize, okay, we have this epic, but we don't have enough information about it, so we're not, we need to groom that a lot, and we'll go do research. It's kind of an education system, and the more that you can just kind of show the value and help educate everyone on why it's good, not just what UX is. Sometimes it takes more time with certain people, but it's interesting. Like, so comparing like where I'm at now at the Home Depot to other companies I've worked at in the past, like Home Depot seems to be a lot more mature in their UX practice. When I started, and it's just been in January, I kind of came in and they were saying, okay, make sure you don't design anything yet. Like, don't open Figma because we're going to do research. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, we need to make sure that these things we plan to do like are right and valid. I'm like, I feel like I stepped into the Twilight Zone because I'm like, this is amazing. Like, you're literally telling me not to design and we're going to research first. Usually it's the other way around. I have to convince them that, you know, we're not just screen designers. So that was kind of a random tangential rant, but
I actually have a question for you. So Dara asked a question, but I'm not sure I understand it. Is that lean research and testing in groups of 5? I'm not sure if what she's looking at to see that, but
Oh, I'm here.
hey Dara, can you
Hey.
explain your question?
So I'm certified through NNG, and one of the things that they say is that you really only need to test with the groups of 5 people to get maybe 80% or more of usability problems. So when you're doing your lean UX testing, are you doing it in like groups of 5 and just failing often just to figure out what it is that you need to fix? Or when you're talking about your research as well, are you talking about like doing it like modular research and lean research where you do a little bit, then you go and you make changes and then you test, and then you go back and do a little bit more research? I mean, that's usually part of the whole process, but it sounds like to me you're talking about failing fast and then doing just enough research to get to the next step, and then using just enough people to test for pain points to make sure you're solving the right problems. Does that make sense?
yeah, no,
now?
I think a lot of what you said is definitely true.
Okay.
Just to kind of show this graph, this is, I'm pretty sure what you're referencing. You know, Nielsen has done thousands of usability tests, and this one is specifically around usability of websites. So yes, over the course of time, he found that you don't really find a lot more usability issues once you get past, you know, 5, 6, 7. So to me, my takeaway from this is that, say you were going to test with 15, you know, you had budget or time to test with 15 users. It'd be better to do 3 tests with 5 people than to do 1 test with 15, because you're just not going to get a lot of information. It plateaus, right? Like you said,
Right.
you find most of the issues. And this is specifically just about usability of the software, though, not necessarily about other things like validating who your users are, or, you know, what they need, or, you know, context of all kinds. I mean, you know, any kind of other research you might want to do, surveying, observation, that kind of stuff. You know, Lean just tries to make all of that stuff easier. And to me, like, it does suggest some ways to do it, but I think I've seen every company is different on how to be lean at that company. So that's why I try to think of it as a mindset versus a prescriptive process. But
No, that makes sense. I mean, so I did websites before responsiveness. It tells you how long ago it was. And I work primarily with SMBs, small and medium-sized business schools. So I want to switch to enterprise. So I'm back at grad school, and they've talked about lean UX before, but we haven't implemented it as a practice or even gone through the steps in any of our classes. So that's why I was very interested in hearing what you had to say tonight.
yeah, I haven't gone through any formal, you know, lean UX training. You know, obviously there's books and all kinds of things on
Right.
any, you know, user-centered design practice, and lean UX is obviously a popular one now. You know, I kind of wanted to just give a high-level overview of kind of what the industry says it is, what I think it is, and then just kind of talk about it with you guys, not necessarily like I'm a lean UX lean UX expert.
No.
But
this
yeah,
is great.
I think one of the struggles is that, like, we can read about things in books, and then there's practice in the real world. right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I do have a question, just based on where you've worked or things that people you've talked to, things you've heard, like where have you seen, this process done well, and like streamlining it, making it more accessible to more people, like the lean style, and why? I guess that would be my question. Or have you? I mean, who's doing this kind of stuff?
I'm sure there's tons of companies doing it well formally. I've mostly seen success with it when I just kind of do it. Like it's kind of always been for UX-y type stuff, especially research. It's often been do it because it's the right thing, not necessarily because like, your boss or the product manager or whoever is asking you to do it. So it's a lot of behind the scenes stuff in my experience. And I'm sure tons of companies, it's part of their process and they do it and it's integrated really well. But usually in most, except for Home Depot, which is pretty good about, again, doing research. It's a large company, so it is a little bit more formal. But in a small company or a large company, there are ways to do, user experience design and research leanly. Sometimes it's just doing it. Like we were asked to design, God, what was it? There was something at the bank where they were asking us to design a UI to support a feature. And the UX team just really, we're like, we don't understand the value in this and we don't know who will use it. And business is like, we're doing it. And we're like, well, and they're like, we've already started coding it. We just need the screens. And we're like, okay. So we went off and talked to marketing and got a sample of our customers, sent them a survey and, said, if we were to roll out this feature, and here are a couple of ways that it would work. And I went back to the business person who was requesting it and said, I'm not telling you what to do, but just so you know, UX did some research with an existing customer set and here's what we found. So, kind of, we'd recommend, changing course or doing something like this, but, obviously, I think it was, how did I state it? It was something like, oh, I don't know the business strategy. So if 10% of the user base using this, accomplishes our business objectives, then, I think we'll be able to do that. And so it's kind of a little bit of reading between the lines of like 10%. If that's all we get, that's definitely not gonna hit our goals. So that was just one case of where we just had to go do research, and we did it fairly quickly because we knew that they had started development. And I did hear later down the line that they paused and they were going to reassess things. So that was kind of a win in that case. Some development teams and product managers who've done things at other companies come in with, yes, we're going to do this. We're going to make time for this. They'll reach out ahead of time. And a lot of times it's just education, trying to worm your way in and find out who's doing the things. Early managers for me had often said, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, with a grain of salt, right? You don't want to do anything dangerous or detrimental, but yeah, in the real world, I've never found it to like actually follow the script that a book tells you, or even blog posts like these things that I looked at, I think it's like, ideally, here's how lean works. And like, yes, there are things to do. And that's kind of just what I tried to pull out of these things, though. It's trying to reduce waste. And how do you do that? By not having large documents and not focusing too much on the future and involving the users. So as was said, I don't necessarily call it failing fast. I think it's learning fast, because to me, learning's not failing, but semantics there. Being collaborative, a lot of teams just do that, but if you're not, like, you design something and throw it over the wall and development goes and builds it, there's just not good communication there. So there's a breakdown, things can take way longer. So a lot of these things just end up leading to less time spent and better products. And so that's kind of my takeaway from all of this. But again, these are just my thoughts. So I'm sure everyone has experienced different stuff.
Hey, Mike, in that topic of collaboration, since you mentioned it, I was curious to know what is the main difference between the Scrum, right, Agile, and the Lean Agile, and how do you manage to utilize Lean UX and Scrum when you work with developers? Is there a way to, okay, I guess work out the differences and similarities in those two frameworks?
I don't necessarily know the like academic differences between the two, because I don't necessarily see them as an either or. Like, so Scrum is a form of Agile. It uses specific meeting types, right? You have a backlog and you have sprints, and you write user stories based off of epics, which are kind of just large chunks of work. Sorry, my light is so bad. I'm just realizing it just got super dark in here, but hold on. I'm going to try to turn this light on and see if it helps. Not too much better. Oh, well. Oh, light, the evening time. So it's back to Scrum, and the way Scrum is typically, contrasted with Kanban, it's just a different type of Agile way to work. But yeah, I mean, Scrum, you have your backlog, and you work with product owner, product manager to figure out what stories you're going to work on, for the next two weeks, or sometimes you can plan out 2 or 3 sprints ahead. When they're planning that stuff out, it's really hard to do a lot of UX work in that sprint. Typically they're building, and they really need to know what they're building before they start building it. And so that's kind of where you just really need a strong relationship with the product manager, product owner, program manager, whoever's kind of populating the backlog epics from a high level, because you have to work on all that stuff at least 2, if not as many sprints as you can ahead. I think once you're just like in the sprint itself, a lot of times I've seen it's just the designers are working with the developers on any kind of tweaks that need to be made, whether it's, if they have questions on a design system component, or they're like, hey, this, the layout, colors. I feel like a lot of that is, not giant, big research question problems. And another way to make the relationship good with developers is show them early. Like if you're working on stuff sprints ahead, even if it's just sketching, whiteboarding, prototyping, I always try to go to the developers and say, hey, we have this idea. Before we even test it, like, is it feasible at all? Like, I don't want to design something that can't be built. So that's kind of where that collaboration comes in. Talking to the developers as early as you can, I think, is important, just like talking to the users is important. To me, the Lean UX part is more kind of before that development, right? Because you're trying to validate all the big questions and talk to users early. But again, if involving the full team as early as you can, I think is optimum. If that answers any questions.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because that kind of relationship crumbled, right, in my team, because it was just not working. So we kind of plan separately, have backlogs separately, and then we get together when it's like, okay, this is when planning weeks, so these are the things that are going to get done. So I was wondering if there was a way to kind of make it I guess build that up again in a way, but yeah, it's hard.
It definitely is hard, and I found it hard to do it from the ground up, like without kind of leadership support and like strong leadership saying, we are going to work like this. And like, I mean, if a senior leader should understand what these mean, right? Like at Regions Bank, we had nothing against HP or consultants, but they came in and so somebody created something called the Scaled Agile framework for the enterprise. And it's basically how to take Agile and scale it up to, a giant company. And, they came in and talked about all this stuff and talked about all the ceremonies, backlog grooming and demos, and talked about the process. And like, they didn't mention UX at all. When I, at some point during that, whatever, 2 or 3 day training, I was like, so where does UX fit into this? And like, oh yeah, you guys are like the guardrails, you know, you are part of the acceptance criteria, you know, must adhere to the style guides. I'm like, okay, but you know, UX is a lot more than that, right? Like all these other things that, you know, we do. And I think he just either tried to gloss over it because it wasn't part of the training, or he really didn't understand all the UX things. So that was really hard because, you know, a lot of the developers and business analysts, project managers were being trained in this thing, but I don't feel like they were necessarily being trained the right way. But, you know, who was I as, you know, at that point, I don't know, junior mid-level UXer to say, you know, this high-paid consultant from HP is wrong. Like, here's how we should do it. I tried to do that, you know, and it's kind of one of those, not fight the good fight, but, you know, try to do what you think is right in that situation and circumstance. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And you have to kind of take those learnings and go on to the next team and say, okay, you know, here's what worked and here's what didn't. You know, when we started using things like Slack and Teams, it was much easier to communicate often with developers. So that's like one thing I definitely recommend. Like, ping your developers, ping your product manager with ideas, sketches, prototypes, whatever. Like, hey, I heard you were talking about this thing, you know, do you mean like this? And they could say yes or no. And then a lot of times I'll even just reach out to developers and say, like, you know, ask them crazy system stuff, because part of UX is performance, right? And so the more you know about the whole tech stack, I think it helps us design once we're to that point, understanding, oh, well, there's an API that'll get this thing. So if we can get this thing for the customer, we can also show this thing, which will allow us to put a useful thing on the dashboard. And I think, you know, the more UX can be proactive in helping to suggest good experiences versus just waiting for the product manager to come to you, I think that can help, you know, foster that we can be involved earlier in higher kind of strategy and direction discussions, and we're not just all UI designers. Tangential rant, sorry. All my responses end up.
I love that. You had some examples and I interrupted you and then we went off on a tangent. Do you want to go
Oh,
back
no,
to
no,
your
it's fine.
examples?
Take your learnings, what worked, what.
Oh, Sherry captures all of our thoughts for us at every UX and ATX. So.
Okay. What other examples did I have of what worked and what didn't? When I worked I worked at a bunch of banks, 15 years in banking. And if anyone works in banking, hopefully you get out of it soon. Banking is fun and challenging and exhausting, but I did a lot. Luckily I got to work on the intranet at Wachovia. If anybody remembers that bank before Wells Fargo took over. I thought intranet work was super fun because my users were all around. So that was just such a great environment, because we could just go ask them questions and say, ask them anything, right? Like, how often do you use the internet? Do you know what an intranet is? People would be like, what's the internet? Like, oh, you mean the thing when I open my web browser? And sometimes I would like, you know, can I watch you do a thing for 10 minutes? Around benefits time was great. Watching them do tasks like that. We could easily print out stuff and put it in front of them, build prototypes and just say, hey, can you come over here? Or I would email it to them and like, bring this up, you know, just do really quick usability tests. I feel like there wasn't like a lean UX wasn't really a thing back then. We were just using lean methods to get research quickly. We would share them with our product managers and developers, you know, at our next stand up or, you know, meet afters. So that's kind of, again, like I didn't have formal lean training. I just was doing what kind of felt right. And then you kind of refine over time. And as you learn more stuff like this, right, formal user-centered design stuff, and you can get better at usability testing and learn which research method to use and when, get better at writing surveys. But at the core of it, I think it's just doing it as often and quickly as you can, as cheaply as you can, sharing it with as many people as you can. I found that at Wachovia a lot. You know, I talked about test. Oh, another one that worked pretty good. It was Leanly. I did a contract for Nissan working on an inspection app, and I'll get to, all right, after this one, I'll go to Sherry. And I wasn't able to, I was able to observe technicians at the, at 3 different places that were actually doing the inspection. So that was great ahead of time, but their time was pretty valuable. And I wasn't able to go back and do like live testing on stuff. So I just kind of reached out to some neighbors and said, does anybody have a Nissan car that I can come test this app with? Because I need to scan the VIN and then do a few things with it. And so I just reached out to my neighborhood on Facebook, and was able to get some people to help out doing usability testing with it and testing features of the app. Bank stuff was pretty easy to test with family members and friends. Observation, that when a lot of this is bank stuff related because I worked there so much of my career, but I visited my local branch and just built relationship with the people. I was like, hey, I work for corporate and we work on online banking and mobile banking and just kind of want to come introduce myself. And if your customers ever come in and have issues with any of the digital stuff, like email me, I want to hear about it. And that kind of built up that relationship. And then I would reach out and say, hey, can I come watch, just watch the bankers, like help the customers for an hour one day? And they'd be like, sure. So sometimes, to be lean later, it might take a little bit of planning early on. So I found that, I learned that just over time, just kind of relationship building helps in the future. All right, I'll pause and go to, let's see, Sherry remembers Wachovia, that's good. Sorry, you had your hand up. How is Lean UX different from just Lean? I mean, I think it's just doing user experience practices leanly is how I think about it. I'm sure the writers of this book probably would have a better definition of it, but user-centered design, obviously user-centered, talking to real humans and not just assuming things and building things. So I think it's just being lean with your UX practices, but that's just my interpretation, if that answers the question.
There's another question from Andrina. Because we heard in June, someone introduced the concept of the minimum lovable product. Have you ever heard that term before in contrast to the minimum viable product?
I haven't, but I like that. I like the essence of that. So I definitely like the idea of that. It sometimes, like I've heard, like there was a big push on like moments of delight, and there's like this emotional connection that I think companies want people to have with their product. And in certain circumstances, yes, definitely, right? Like shopping at Target or Lulu or Chewy, like there's an emotional connection that you want with that brand. But for so many things that I think a lot of us work on that are not exciting and fun like that people just kind of want to do their job, and it just needs to be super easy. They want to get in, do the thing, get out, or get an alert about a thing. Like, I think it's like they love the fact that it's not hard and it doesn't bother, distract them from doing the other things. But so yeah, kind of to play both sides of it. I do like that as opposed to MVP though. It's kind of does focus more on the person. The product is for the person and it should be for them. Like they should at least like using it, I guess, or not hate using it.
There's a big difference, right? Like,
yeah,
there's so many things that we don't even think about when we're using. And then there are the things that we enjoy using. But if we could bring some delight, I guess, to those things that we have to use, I mean, it might be different in a B2B kind of circumstance, where your company has bought it for you and you're not expected to enjoy using the product. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, like, using like Workday, like, does anybody love using Workday? Or, I mean, certain things like maybe Monday.com or Asana, people might say, oh my gosh, I love using that compared to like spreadsheets or smart sheets or whatever. So in that case, yes, it can happen. I think, like, I don't know too many people who say, oh my gosh, I love my mobile banking. And I mean, I'm sure some people do, like they're compared to other things, right? Wells Fargo, oh, so all right. So April loves Wells Fargo app. That's awesome. I mean, again, it's just me. Everyone has different opinions and can like and love whatever they want. I guess I do pick my bank based on the mobile app, but after working in banking. I remember talking to somebody early on in my career though, and kind of coming from the psychology, computer science background versus like a design art background. I just kind of have a different spin on things, and not better or right, just different. And talking to, this was kind of before the whole like zero UI or invisible interface thing. I remember talking to somebody and saying the most usable product is one that you don't have to use, because if you don't have to use it, there's no friction points, right? So like, let's get out of the user's way. And I don't know. And that's kind of where that happiness advocate thing kind of stemmed from. Like for me personally, like my goals in life are to hang out with my kids more and go mountain biking more and go outside more. And I don't want to have to like go on my bank app and like check my balance. So it's like, I don't know, send me an alert if I have a low balance, right? Like, so to me, that's kind of just how I sum up like the core of what UX is. And like, how do you get to those things? Like, you do all this stuff and kind of practice being lean and focus on products and make them better and talk to the team. So I don't know. I mean, there's obviously, if you're a game designer or you're working on something where you want people to actually hang out and spend time on your site, I think it's completely different. And most of the stuff I've worked on has been more like authenticated tool based, where really somebody just needs to get in and do a thing and then get out, and they're not hanging out on my apps and sites. But isn't that defeating the purpose of personas if they're not based on actual people? Oh wait, let's see, what did Dara say? I sometimes can't find people that fit my proto persona, so I look at pain points through Yelp or the app stores, then I test.
Hey, Mike. So I'm in grad school. So
Okay.
So that's how I'm using UX. At school, it's very, very difficult sometimes to get actual people who fit our personas for our projects. And I try to make my projects as real as possible. So that's what the proto personas are. They're not verified personas. That's why they're called proto personas, whoever's asking. If I was in a corporate setting, more than likely we would have someone who does the personas, or I would help me with them. So that's what it is, Marcella.
Yeah, I've heard that term, proto personas, before, definitely.
Yeah. It's based on the information that you have, that you've collected. So it is a little bit of guesswork, but for the purpose of academia, I think it's enough.
And I would say any research is better than none, right? So
yeah,
building a proto persona is better than not thinking about your personas at all. Like, you can always take everything, a step further and do something more and longer and better, but I don't know, baby steps, and it helps more than not doing things. Like, you can kind of get caught in the analysis paralysis for too long, and then you don't do anything.
Well, and if they only give you like five working days to do it.
Yeah, that would be tough to really develop personas and do some in-depth research. Yeah, you got to work with what you have. I mean, that's another huge thing that, I've learned in life. Projects rarely go as planned, and you're never going to get to do everything you want and talk to all the users and do as much research. At the end of the day, you got to hopefully be happy with what you are able to do. And if not, you say, okay, hopefully we can do a little bit more next project. Yeah, but it's interesting coming. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, if there are any other questions, please put them in the chat, because this is a great discussion. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. I just say, I even after working 20 years, I learned so much from like newer, younger people lately that are, actually getting degrees in this stuff. Cause like having colleges and boot camps and, General Assembly, like people are teaching this stuff now and they're learning all kinds of stuff. And so I think it's a good balance of, having all this knowledge of how best to do something, and then also having experience of having to, kind of figure out how to do it and kind of be scrappy at it. So it's really fun working with all kinds of people, I think. I learn a lot every day because a lot of the people, Home Depot's UX team is bigger than any other team I've worked on. And actually I gotta give I know Unji's not here, but I actually got into this meetup because of Unji. She works at Home Depot. So there's some other folks in the Austin UX at Home Depot, but that team is just huge, and I'm amazed. I feel like I haven't felt imposter syndrome in a little while because I've been on small teams, but now on a team of over 200, I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are amazing and their artifacts are polished and it's great. And, you know, I'm not a visual designer, graphic designer. I kind of have always focused more on just like content and getting it to people more quickly than trying to polish it. But yeah, I'm definitely kind of jealous of when somebody shows a cool thing they did in After Effects to like illustrate the story. I'm like, oh my gosh, I would probably never be able to do that. But you have to just realize that you do provide value, whatever you do. Someone called
Sorry, I was
Debbie
just-
Levitt is really against Lean UX. I wasn't sure if it's something that's controversial. Oh my gosh, NPS. That would be a fun whole meetup just to go on tangents about NPS.
I've never heard of controversy around Lean UX. I know Debbie. She's very nice. She has a lot of strong opinions about lots of different things. So it might just be Debbie.
The Lean
Feels
UX
that way.
book is neither lean nor UX. Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't have time to read this, but it'll be, I'm for lean, but this isn't lean. It's kind of funny. Like, I remember like when I was learning Agile early on, and then I kind of got it, and then I was teaching it at later companies, you know, they were like, we have to do Agile by the book. I'm like, there is no book. Like, that's the point. Like, read the manifesto, and that's what Agile is. And they're like, yeah, but we have to follow the process. I'm like, yes, but I don't know. So I'm wondering if that's kind of what she's talking about, or if it's not to talk bad about anyone, but you know, Jared Spool, I feel like is the shock jock of the UX world, and sometimes I feel like he just throws stuff out there just to get a rise out of people like me. I always want to be like, nah, but it's kind of, yeah, I'd be curious to. Oh, Debbie just hates lean and wants to do long, bloated, expensive UX work. That's what I was thinking. So I don't know. I haven't read that book. So you know, if anyone has and wants to share about it, or you know, post about it in Slack, I would love to hear from somebody who's read the book and thinks it's great, and somebody who's read it and doesn't think it's useful. Like apparently Deb.
Well, Mike, we're coming up on the time when I have to get
Yeah.
my students back to class. So I wanted to see, are there any burning questions? If you want to come off mute and ask
Sorry,
a
I just
burning
realized
question.
I was sharing the wrong browser. Here's that Debbie Levitt. Yeah.
And then there was silence.
Yeah, and if your burning questions are about She-Hulk or any other Marvel
Oh.
or Star Wars thing, I'm happy to answer questions on that too.
So April, as a former student, knows that this will delay getting students to class. Mike, what's your favorite app?
My favorite app. So I used to say this like quickly and emphatically that it was Cash App, because I don't know if anybody still uses it or remembers it. It came out way before Venmo, and it just did one thing really, really well. You could pay your friends, and all it did was, I mean, you literally type the number, a person, and go. Like, that's all it was. And then they started adding more features, and it got a little bloated. And then I had an issue with security, and so now I don't even use it. Favorite app. I would have to look through my history. Like, nothing really jumps out to me as favorite app. Like, there's the ones I use the most, but I mean, I think I probably use, you know, text iMessage the most out of anything on my phone, just because no one seems to call anymore. I use the Notes app a lot. I feel like it's, well, I don't know. The older I get, the less I like using my phone. So I try not to. I like only use it when I have to. I still play the silly Wordle and Quirtle games, so I use Safari a lot. But from an actual app standpoint, I feel like a lot of the big retailers have gotten pretty good at app stuff. I mean, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Lowe's. Whenever I use them to like either find a product or find hours or purchase something or pick it up, they all seem to be really easy now. So I would assume they have lots of UX people and really great product teams working on that stuff.
Right, Rose has a question, and then I want to hit Eric's question in the chat.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, Cindy. This is a bit off topic, but I'm a product owner, and I was wondering how Home Depot increases collaboration between designers and coders.
So they have what they call a balanced team, where they really partner developers and a product owner and UX people together, and they work on all this stuff all the time. So they're kind of forced to. I don't know how it was before. And they all seem to do it through Slack and Teams fairly well. Everyone seems to report that they have great relationships with their product owner and their developers, and vice versa. You know, our director says that technology says, you know, our UX is helping them out greatly. So I think it's just like from the top down is a good way to do it, having balanced teams where you know, it's not just like you have your UX team over here and your product team over there and your development team over there. Like each team has a little slice of each thing. So I've seen it work best, and how Home Depot seems to do it.
Thank you so much.
All right, Mike. Eric asks, any general tips for using data to support your decisions when the boss isn't listening?
Well, there's always going to be a boss who just doesn't care about data, right? Like I've been with the CMO and just like, I know the research says that 99% of people want this, but I don't care. We're doing it this way. But assuming your managers and leadership are reasonable, again, like I point to that survey thing from Regions, like just go get some data, you know, talk to, if you have any data analytics people, go try to answer the question. Usually data and research will answer those debates, so that you don't want them to end up being subjective. Like unless they just, you know, unless they get paid a lot more and they can make those decisions regardless of data. But having more data and understanding what the data means and how you present it too is kind of the biggest tip. Usually people don't care how you gathered the research, and they don't really want to see charts. I think it's just distilling it down to what is that thing, right? Like 90% of people said this, or only 5% of people wanted this, or most people couldn't do a thing or want a thing, or half and half, so it doesn't matter. I think just over time you learn how to interpret and kind of synthesize data to know how to present the thing that's important to them. Because like if you're talking to a product owner is going to be different than a marketing person, is going to be different than like an accounting person. So understanding what their goal is with the project can help you kind of shape that data. Like ESPN, you know, tells you the story in the data of how they think, you know, just me sitting on the couch wants to know it. It would be different than telling the manager of the team.
Yeah.
So UX the way you present data.
Last question before we wrap. If you can take just one thing away from today's session, what do you want it to be?
We can take just one thing from today's session. I would say, you know, don't wait for someone to tell you to do UX the way you think it needs to be done. You know, just start doing it. Put up wireframes or sketches on a wall, or post them on Slack now if you're remote. You know, go just start talking to users. Like, you know, at Home Depot, I before I even started, I just went to the store and just started talking to customer service people and cashiers and customers if I didn't think it was creepy. Like, just start doing it. The more you do it, you know, the easier it'll get, and the more you learn on how better to do it. So don't wait to be told that you can do the things that you know need to be done. Like, be the Dark Knight of your organization, right? No one was asking Batman to like protect people, but he knew it was the right thing, so he just went and did it.
That was awesome. Mike, thank you so much for your time tonight and sharing all your knowledge in this mirror board and that conversation. I hope everyone got some value out of it. And with that, is it okay if people can try to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, definitely. should be easily searchable. I'll just post it here real quick. Oh, it's in the mirror board, but there you go. Yeah, happy to continue chatting, and definitely, you know, ping me and tell me that everything I said was wrong and dumb, and I'll love to converse about it.
Sounds good.
Or it's awesome and amazing, and you want to hire me for $10 million. Either way.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike. And with that, we're going to wrap this edition up. I will see everyone in October for our Design Skills Matrix workshop. Have a good night, everyone. And
Thanks so much,
students,
Cindy.
I'll see you all
Thanks,
back in
Austin.
class. Bye.
Have fun at school. Listen to your teacher. Bring her lots of flowers and apples and candy.
That's right.
Unless
Bye,
she's
y'all.
diabetic, then don't bring candy. Have a good evening.
Bye.